Hello everyone and welcome to my new little video. If you don't know me, I'm a developer and I developed this VST plugin called NEL-19, which is a vibrato with a random curve, just like in tape emulations, but without the tape degradation stuff. And in this video we will just try to use it and meanwhile discover its use cases and also maybe find the potential for improvement in the future. And I will be completely honest with myself, because I'm not a fan of saying that everything is perfect and next level and stuff, and we will definitely be honest about everything that kind of sucks or that could just be improved for future concepts, future releases and updates of the same plugin. Because even though I would consider this a final product already, I can still just throw out updates and it will be even more final then. You know how it is, just the same as with good mixes, and you just released it and then suddenly you are glad that you have a SoundCloud Pro account and you can re-upload the thing again. Yeah, so we have a beat and it sounds like this. And we will use it. We'll use the plugin on these different types of sounds and we will see where the journey gets us. We start with a pad. Well, first of all, one of the new features of the plugin is that you can enter the buffer size in milliseconds. And I made it so that it has a default size of 5. I think I will turn it down a little bit though, because the best size for subtle stuff is 2 milliseconds. With 2 milliseconds you can be really subtle on high frequencies. As you can see, this is the depth of the effect and this is the frequency. This is the stereo width. But on this particular sound it does not make sense to add stereo width because it's already stereo enough. It could be that you want to use a lower frequency on this, like 4 Hz, which is typical for wow and flitter stuff. In that case, it might sense to turn up the buffer size a little bit, so that the depth has a little bit more power. You always want to make sure that the buffer size is as low as possible for whatever you want to do, in case you want to use it live while playing an instrument, because the buffer size also defines the latency. So with a buffer size of 4 milliseconds, you have a latency of 2 milliseconds. That's how it is defined. Yeah, so for this particular sound I want to go for a low buffer size and for a fast frequency. Now there is this Arpeggiator that kind of plays together with the pad, even though it's an ARP. And I think for the ARP it might make sense to actually go for the 4 Hz, which are also the default values here, and just turn up the depth a bit. And as you can see, you can also go for fractional values here in the buffer size. That's alright, you can do that. Yeah, so I think that's already it for the pad and the ARP. They sound very nice. Also noticeable that even though the latency is compensated as good as possible, the transients still might be a little bit off with the timing the more it vibrates, which is normal for a time domain vibrato. And this is cool in this case because it adds a little bit more life and humanizing effect to this layer of pads and ARP. And now we go on with the bass line. On bass lines you usually have to listen to it very carefully to even hear the effect at all. Let us turn it up really hard. You see, we are listening to it in solo, and only now it's even audible. We don't want to go too hard on the bass because it's a bass line and basses are usually very centered, but it's still nice to have it here. Now with the drums I want to show you something special. I will make another group for the drums and just send the drums there. This is the aim and bass now, and with the send I will just send its entire sound there. So instead of processing the aim and break itself, I process the parallel bass, and it sounds like this. Obviously at this point it does not make sense anymore to go for such a high buffer size. By the way, 1000 milliseconds, so 1 second, that's the maximum buffer size of the plugin. But I just wanted to show that with low values you can make sort of a flanger. But since it has a random curve, it's not a flanger that just goes in sine wave like you usually know, but it's more like a chorus effect in this case. And a chorus might be a little bit higher. Yeah, that's more chorus. Okay, that's getting quite robotic now. Well, this is the first critique that I have on myself. That I didn't add a mix knob here, so I always have to make another bus for that. That's kind of annoying. I should really add a mix knob to my plugin at some point, but up until now this is just the way you do it. Let's get rid of this track again because I actually think it makes no sense to flange these drums, and I also won't process them at all because you don't have to process every effect with a vibrato. Now let's get to another feature, and for this feature I actually recorded a little vocal track, and I'm not the best singer of all time, and this is also good because it will highlight a key feature of my plugin, which is first of all, let's listen to the vocals. yeah, I'm not always perfectly on pitch, so we're making a new MIDI track, and in this MIDI track we will add some pitch bend information, and now we say MIDI learn. Alright, I have to send the MIDI information to the plugin, obviously. Okay, now the plugin learned that it's listening for MIDI pitch information. So if I turn down all the randomizing stuff, I can completely configure my sound with the pitch bend wheel. And since my MIDI controllers currently are a little bit broken, I guess, I will just write it here like this. And I will show you something about the way it works. As you can hear, with the angle of the line that I'm drawing with the pitch bend information, I can define the way it pitches the signal up or down. But it also needs to go back at some point, because it always has to be continuous. That's a little bit annoying, and that's what makes Melodyne much more comfortable, but this is just how it works if you can't capture the audio beforehand, but just try to do it in a way that is real-time safe. This is the real-time way of doing that in a time domain. And I think that can also be pretty neat if you actually want this funky effect with the pitch slide sometimes. Yeah, so as you can see, this is not really easy to use, and I definitely have some issues with that. Like, it's really hard to really find a pitch that works by making lines that have some angle, and it's not something that's most intuitive for writing melodies. But at the same time, this is a huge opportunity to manipulate vocals and other melodic material in a way that really doesn't sound like anything else. So I really like how it came out, and in the future version of this plugin, I want to make an actual editor for such curves that will make this way easier. I don't want to go into detail yet, and it's definitely not possible to implement that soon. But this is how it currently works, and that's already rather cool. So we have the vocal pitch band information here in here now. And of course, one huge advantage towards Melodyne currently is that you can just move that around together, while if you don't use Melodyne with Aura, then you can't do that. You have to render the audio out in order for it to work. So yeah, it's kind of a hard compare a plugin like this with Melodyne. Obviously Melodyne much more technologically improved in general, but still this is just fine for an application like this, where you have to creatively manipulate a vocal pitch. And you could still just go over that with Melodyne afterwards. Actually, let's try that, and let's see what Melodyne identifies as a pitch. Now, after this effect, probably looks rather funny. Now let's check this out. That's interesting. I know how this looks in Melodyne before the plugin. For example, this note was more like on the F instead of the E. So something that I did really fix this, but on the other hand, this note, I really messed it up. It was much more on the right note before, and now it's in the middle of two notes. So yeah, the fact that you really have to listen to the sound when using this plugin to manipulate the pitch makes it really hard to use, not gonna lie. But it also enables you to come up with really creative pitch slides like this one at the beginning already. And also, this is not a pitch slide that you could do in any way with Melodyne. It would just sound differently, and it would also sound differently with Autotune. So it's pretty cool that I was able to do something like this just with this plugin. And Melodyne revealed the power of my plugin, as well as its weaknesses. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Also, you can use MIDI CC info, but I couldn't test that yet because my MIDI controller is kind of broken, as I said. Now let's try something else. I want to show you something else about this MIDI pitch thing. We had an instance of NEL-19 on the pad as well, as you remember. And now we can go ahead and make another MIDI track. And also send the info to our pads NEL-19 instance. Say MIDI learn, and then go ahead and write some pitch bend. Now the pitch bend information is used in addition to the randomizer, so we can use it to attenuate a specific part, maybe the last part. Let's make this a little bit bigger. No, not like that. Without rasterizing. Okay, this should have been a little bit stronger probably. Something like this. Okay, I must admit, in this case it makes not a lot of sense because the buffer size is only 2 milliseconds long. So using this in addition just really does not add a lot of stuff, and it's really subtle even on extreme settings. So, but it does work, it does add up, because if I turn down the randomizer here, you could hear it. You also see it in my visualizer that it doesn't do anything until this point. So yeah, apparently this is not the right use case for using MIDI pitch or any MIDI modulator in conjunction to the randomizer, but it's possible, and that's also a nice critique on this plugin. There are things that are possible, but the use cases must be extended a little bit. It must be made more accessible at this point. Now the next thing we try in order to evaluate the plugin is using it on a master bus. Even though this is not a lo-fi hip-hop track, it might make sense to get a little bit experimental here. And we will definitely start out with the most extreme setting, just so you know how it sounds like. Which is like this. And you might ask yourself, why would I turn up the buffer size so much if I'm not completely ass in the head? The reason is you can turn down the frequency to 0.5 Hertz, and then it sounds rather cool. So now we applied the pitch bend modulation on the master NEL-19 instance. And if this was like the end of a song or something, yeah, so obviously this would just make it slower for a while. This keeps confusing me, to be honest. I always expect it to get slower over time, but in that case I would have to do something like this. Should make a lot more sense. And this is also why I make my own editor for such stuff. Okay, this in the end will speed it up again, but no matter, it will just bring the idea across. Now the reason why it goes back like that is because look ahead is enabled, and it tries to predict what the next step is going to be. And if the next step is that it flattens out, then it will even before already do that, so that it actually ends up being flattened at this point. That's why it might look a little bit weird. In most cases it makes sense to use look ahead, because it compensates for the latency, and for the subtle settings it's definitely cool. But in this case it might be a little bit confusing. As you've seen, this looked a lot more like it makes sense, but I want to get rid of the of this feature anyway, so that it is definitely constantly look ahead, even though it might look a little bit weird sometimes, and it's just good in most cases, and don't want to think about this mode anymore. So I think that's the way I will take it. Yeah, so that's something that you could do with the MIDI pitch on the master bus. What you could also do is actually put it on a subtle setting. Only use it to sometimes give a little bit of sparkle to specific sequences. Actually, let's turn it up again a bit. We have to listen to the effect. Yeah, nice. As you've heard, now the track sounds normal in most cases, but everything together gets into vibration only for the part where the vocals start. It's if the vocals upset the music, and then it goes back to normal in a nice wavy way. So this was definitely successful in my opinion, and it's a nice way to highlight this feature. Obviously it would be even more fun if I had a MIDI controller on my hands now, so that I could take one hand, play a melody on my synthesizer, and take the other hand on my MIDI controller and make it woo 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 sometimes. I definitely have to try that once everything works again. So yeah, this is the current state of the plugin. That's NEL-19 at the moment. So yeah, a lot of cool features, a lot of cool stuff, and I'm really proud of what it does already. One thing that I want to do soon is implement an even better interpolation method into it. At the moment, I used the so-called cubic spline interpolation to resample the audio onto different speeds, which makes it vibrate, and it's a really good interpolation. It has very low aliasing values, but I recently figured out, I think I figured out how to do a Lanczos sync interpolation, or however this dude's name is pronounced, and I want to incorporate that and see if it sounds better. And also I want to try oversampling, which is useful especially for the higher buffer sizes where the pitch drifts can go really crazy like scratches, and where the frequencies that are created in doing so can exceed Nyquist a lot. In this case, it would make sense to have oversampling. But I know oversampling is a topic especially for vibrators. No one thinks about it, and a lot of people would just turn it on like in general because they don't want to think of it and they don't want it to automatically have the best quality ever. But in most cases it's not even needed, so that would be a waste of CPU. Other people would never turn it on to save CPU and just don't have access to the good sound. So my goal here would be that if I actually implemented oversampling, it would have to automatically find out on which setting it would make most sense to have. How it would automatically readjust its anti-aliasing filters in a way that they just cut off only what is needed and not more and not less. Unless I haven't figured out this automatic stuff, I don't think it's worth it to add it to the plugin, because my plugin is already a little bit complicated with this MIDI learn stuff and the buffer size stuff that is quite nerdy and stuff. I don't want to make it any worse like that. It should only get better at this point, workflow wise. Yeah, that are my current thoughts on it. Also, feel free, as always, to come into the Discord, and also, yeah, here is the info section of the plugin, which has links to the Discord of this plugin, where you can request features or talk about bugs or just hang out and talk with me about anything. Then there is the link to the source code, which also includes the VST3 file, and that's where the new updates will always appear, but you'll only get informed about updates if you are actually in the Discord. Oh, I didn't notice that these buttons are also here when the info section is on. That is not intended. Okay, good to know. Another bug to fix. Yeah, and you can support me via PayPal, but I guess I don't have to stress that. Yeah, this plugin is going to get a lot better, even though it's already super cool. And you can be looking forward to it if you are into randomized vibrators and stuff.